I've been away, but welcome back to the Common Sense Guy. How are you all doing today? I've got Kay with me today. I believe that's still how you go at the minute, isn't it?
Yes, that's still how I go.
Yeah. Hopefully we might have Crumple Point coming on again shortly. If people that are looking at this and watching this at the minute, would you be able to tweet it out for us or share it any way that you can? It doesn't seem that notification seems to be working very well at the minute. So if you could share it for us, I've shared it as much as I can as well. But just to get it out there, give us some people to talk to and whatnot. So hopefully that'll be all right. Yeah, today we're going to be doing two different stories. One focusing on Extinction Rebellion, and the other one should be Boris Johnson's deal. And the Vice President of the EU, we're not actually reading Boris Johnson's letter and actually saying that she hadn't read the actual letter. So, yeah. That should be interesting. I will bring in some more people on that aspect, actually, if I can fit them in. And we can proper have a go at the vice president at that point. But first of all, I suppose I better actually introduce Kay. And how are you doing, friend? It's been a while.
Very well.
It's been a while, mate. It's been a while. Last time we were talking about men's rights and things like that.
Yeah, been a while.
It's been a very long time. Very long time. Though the good thing is, though, we've been able to correspond and talk to each other via Twitter and other aspects. So politics seems to come up quite a bit on Twitter, especially when it comes to Brexit. So I thought, who else better than to get your opinion on this when we get to it? So it should be quite interesting, I think. Lou, did you want to give yourself a little bit of a plug at the beginning so people can see and go to where you are and what you do, so they know properly what you do?
I'm at the moment in a transitional phase on my channel. I used to talk about a lot of men's rights stuff, but obviously that was taking up too much of my channel space and obviously causing my mental health to go down a notch, because obviously worrying about that too much and trying to figure out solutions to that was just not good. So obviously I'm not stopping that altogether. I'm just taking a step back and I'm commenting on basically stuff I find that's stupid. Like recently, I have been going into the men's rights stuff when it comes to stuff like false accusations, i.e. the Zoe Quinn situation and stuff like that. But now I'm starting to focus on basically just anything I find stupid. Like I've been commenting on the obviously Brexit situation, the prorogation of government, Parliament, obviously the language that people are saying that Boris Johnson is using, but rather that turns out they're using far worse language, and basically just stuff I genuinely find stupid or reprehensible, like the race hoax stuff that keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Like tonight I've got a video coming out. I don't want to give away the whole premise of the video, but it's basically, if you don't like a trans person, fucking you're a transphobe.
Interesting.
Yeah,
preferences don't count for anything anymore.
No, and sexuality means absolutely nothing. So I've got that video coming out tonight at 10 p.m. GMT.
Interesting. Why so late? Or is that to go with an American audience as well as the British audience?
It's to go with both, because I think about 75 to 80% of my audience are American. I think that's where I've been going wrong with releasing videos. As soon as I finished them, I've been releasing them, so they're not being seen as much. So if I do it later on for the Americans, then obviously they may get viewed and seen by more than just a few subscribers here and there.
Well, you touched on something that I'm actually really interested in, and that's the prorogation of Parliament and should we say the language that seems to have now been taking precedent of, you said this, so you're bad, but you said this, and it doesn't matter anymore. I find that extremely, well, one, hypocritical, and second of all, absolutely amazing. I believe you quote tweeted as well as I tweeted that there was a banner over a bridge saying
Yeah.
that the Tories are literally responsible for over 130,000 deaths, and it's time to claim them back or do something about it. Obviously,
Yeah.
paraphrasing, but the inference was that we should do something about the 130,000 that apparently are directly contributable to the Tories.
Yeah.
And you're trying to have trying to have a discussion about language, about how one side is apparently supposed to be, let's say, leading into all of this horrible speak and everything, but yet it's the others that are literally calling people Nazis for having different points of view. And yes, David Lammy, I'm talking about you, by calling people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and other Brexiteers of literal Nazis. And then when asked to clarify, you actually stated, David Lammy, that you thought that they were actually worse than actual Nazis.
Yeah, I think it gets worse when you actually listen, actually read off the full quote of what was hanging off the bridge, because I've got it memorized. 130,000 people have been directly or have been killed, have lost their lives due to Tory rule. It's about time we even the playing field.
Yeah, that's
That to
fine
me,
talk.
yeah, that to me sounds like a threat.
Yeah, that proper sounds like fine talk. That does.
Yeah, why else would you say it in such a way? I mean, if it's time to even the playing fields, you're talking about cutting numbers, so you've obviously got rid of 130,000 Tories or whatever.
Yeah.
That is despicable language, and on top of that, they seem to like to call Boris a tin pot dictator a lot lately. But the thing is, I've not known a dictator in history that has wanted the result of a democratic vote respected, and to want to oust or to call a general election that he could possibly lose.
Yeah.
To prove to, obviously, the parliament that have got entrapped in a minority government that there is a consensus for, obviously, what we're going to be talking about later, a no-deal Brexit.
Yeah. I'd absolutely find it massively hypocritical for Jeremy Corbyn, who keeps on saying that, as you said, that Boris Johnson is apparently a dictator. Apparently, Boris Johnson is forming a coup. Apparently, Boris Johnson is doing this. Apparently, Boris Johnson is doing that. And then you literally have Joe Swinston, Jeremy Corbyn, and the SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, all saying that they're going to join together to form a national union government. And yet, as far as I'm aware, that literally falls in the definition of a coup, bar the military aspect.
Yeah, that's a coup.
But yet, wasn't it the right that's the one that's causing a coup?
Yeah, apparently so.
Interesting that they actually are pointing out and saying that the people that are pushing democracy, or at least, should we say, feigns of democracy by trying to say that they're going to uphold the will of the people for the moment, it seems that those people are now saying that they want to be more democratic. But I believe the Liberal Democrats is that they don't even want a general election. They just want to have a referendum. And if they do not have a referendum, then they're going to run on a complete and utter Remain policy. And if they were to win, then they would enact Remain straight away. Then you have fucking Labour, that their policy on Brexit is simply put, what we're going to do is we're going to get the best deal that we can possibly get, that we could ever get. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring it back to you. We're going to bring it back to you so you can vote on it. But as you're going to vote on it, I want you to know that we're going to vote to remain.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard some asinine fucking backward thinking, mainly from Diane Abbott. But but literally, I cannot think of anything more stupid than we're going to produce the best deal that we could ever get, but yet we're going to vote against it because, it's never as good as the deal that we've got with the EU, apparently. doesn't that already play your hand then? And there is literally no point in you actually getting into government saying that you're going to try and feign the idea of democracy. You might as well just do the more honest thing like the Liberal Democrats are and say that you're a Remain party, rather than trying to muddy the waters by saying, we will honour it, just when we get to actually implement it, we're not going to.
Yeah. I mean, they sit there and say, well, it's been 3 years since the vote. People might have changed their mind. It's like, yeah, it was 44 years from the original vote, and people changed their minds.
Yeah.
But obviously, you don't seem to respect the fact that people changed their minds and said, no, we want to come out. Apparently, that's not good enough for you guys.
Well, what's even worse on that one is that they keep on trying to say themselves that, it's a case that we everything's changed, people are dying and things like that, so the demographics are changed.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I understand your point. Demographics change every election. What you're trying to say is that you want to overturn a referendum result that hasn't been implemented yet, while arguing that what you actually want to do is decide on the deal. So, for anybody that is actually democratic and wants to have a democratic opinion on the second referendum, take away Remain, because I've done this to a lot of people that have this second referendum campaign, try and push it. As soon as you ask them to take away Remain and actually vote on what they're trying to push at the beginning of their sentences, that they're trying to vote on the actual deal that we have, they always cry foul, saying that you're not representing all means and all ideas. The point was that we haven't implemented it. So you want to vote on a deal and not rerun what was already happening. So you either want to rerun it or you want to vote on the deal. You can't have both.
Yeah. I mean, when they come out and say that, it's an undemocratic or something of the sort, because obviously people were lied to or exit this, or they didn't know that we're voting for. It's like, I know perfectly well what I voted for.
Yeah, same. I think most people that voted Leave, don't get me wrong, I can't say all, but most, I would have said at least 80% of the people that voted Leave knew exactly what they voted for, did the pros, did the cons, or there was a pressing issue, immigration, or the idea of control from the EU, or whatever. There was something that made them decide that they weren't going to stay in the EU. It had nothing to do with necessarily the campaigns themselves.
And as I was saying before we went live, this is probably the biggest proof I can give to exactly why I voted Leave. Because obviously the EU control us and we're not sovereign. People say, well, that's not true because we can make our own laws. I say, yes, that's technically true. But the proof is in the pudding of the fact that it doesn't matter whether the Ben Act or the Surrender Bill got passed. When it comes to the matters of the EU law takes precedence. And it says in Article 50 that if we don't have 2 years, or we'd have 2 years, and if there wasn't a deal reached by the end of that, no matter what laws get passed in the meantime to prevent a deal or no deal or etc., the EU laws will already take precedence, and what their laws say will go. That's the biggest proof I can probably give someone that we're not actually sovereign, because in our own elections of whether we want to stay or leave, their laws take precedence over ours. It's like, how can
you're correct.
It's like, there's no bigger demonstration I can give that we're not sovereign when it comes to matters of the EU or matters of trade and etc.
Oh, trade. See, that's exactly where I was going to go on to from your point afterwards, which was I love the fact that people say that we can make our own trade deals. Now, for anybody that's been following the idea of Brexit and what we can and cannot do at this minute in time, it is stated by EU law that we, by ourselves at this moment in time, cannot interact or finalize or sign any trade deals while we are still connected to the EU, as we are still bound by the customs union and the single market laws stating that we have to, as a union, European Union, agree on complete and utterly, everybody has to agree on who we trade with. And that's absolutely amazing to me that people still argue the fact that they think that we are sovereign and we can control our own deals, yet literally in stipulation from the EU stating that we cannot make any new deals, why we are transitioning and why we're even attempting to negotiate our own deals regardless, because the EU says goddamn so.
Yeah.
Now, if anybody wants to try and say, well, that's to do with good faith. No, that's the EU telling us we can't make trade deals to make people see that we can actually make these trade deals and actually be independent by ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, if people sit there and say we cannot live without the EU, the EU has made us prosper, etc., etc. Within the EU, what, 50 years? We, at one point in history, we owned 75% of the world. I mean, I think we can handle being a sovereign and independent nation, don't you?
Well, not even going back into history, we're the sixth largest, bar if you were to break up the states of the US, but we are the sixth largest economic GDP economy in the world.
Yeah,
we have the power to make our own trading. Now, I know a lot of people will go on to the aspect of, well, the EU, but we buy more off of the EU than what the EU buys off of us. Correct, we do. Which means that if we were to leave the EU, they would lose massive amounts of trade.
Yeah.
But when you actually point that out to people, they say, oh, yeah, but our trading block is absolutely nothing. It's like I say to, for instance, yourself, if I was to say, right, I'm going to take away 20% of your wages straight off the bat, are you going to fucking notice?
Yes.
That's the equivalent of what we would do straight away from the World Trade Organization rules from the EU. We take 20% of our overall exports.
Yeah, I mean, 20% in my case is fucking 300 quid. Of course I know that.
Yeah. Yeah, 20% is it's quite a lot of money, to be fair. It's almost a quarter. Almost a quarter of their total amount of money coming in from a specific aspect.
And if you have something like 10 billion, 20% of that is 2 billion quid. That's a lot of money. Exactly. I mean, when it comes to, like as Boris Johnson's doing now, with the £1 billion, we would be sending the EU per month. He can train, and he's doing it, 20,000 new police officers. Something we desperately need in this country at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could have the argument that the Tories themselves cut them first and then it was coming back. So I wouldn't necessarily go as that's something amazing that it's doing. It's kind of replacing what they already took away. So I wouldn't praise that myself.
No, it's not praise. It's basically just saying it's an example of what we could do with that money.
Well, I like the actual aspect of what people say to Boris Johnson that he's a liar on, where we can have £350 million to £380 million gross a week from taking money back from the EU to go straight onto the NHS or to whatever other aspects that we want.
Yeah,
by the way, that is the ONS figures: 350 to £380 million gross.
Yeah, but the thing is, they're calling him a liar for saying that he'd do that, but he never actually said he would do that. He just said it's a possibility that we could use the money for. He used it as an example. I mean, like,
for the NHS, yeah, but they mainly were going on about the idea of the actual figure. They were trying to say that the figure was wrong, and the figure is not wrong. That's the reason they got laughed out of fucking court.
Yeah, the figure was 100% correct.
Yeah, even according to the ONS figures.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot disagree with the ONS.
Well,
they are in the UK. They're the powerhouse for statistics.
And yeah, just remember that they predicted everything wrong about Brexit.
Oh well, yeah, but so did the banks, and I mean, we're supposed to be in free fall at the moment. Yet our economy is starting to boom. I mean, with our European nationals going home because they know they can't survive here any longer, they're going back to their own countries, back to Poland and stuff. You've got builders' jobs because obviously the Polish builders are now leaving and there's more demand for builders. Wages for British builders is going through the roof. I think it's now starting at anything to £44,000 to £48,000 per annum. I think it's gone up by 10%. So by probably £4,000 to £8,000 a year.
Mm.
That's a lot of money for a lot of people.
It is. It is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. I mean, Memes with Destruction, I'm not trying to change the subject, but Memes with Destruction has made an excellent point in chat, which I put onto the screen. Could the UK declare war on the EU if they don't want to let you deal? Technically, we could. We could declare war. You can declare war for almost any reason. I mean,
I don't like this country, declare war.
pretty much. You can declare war for any fucking reason whatsoever. But could the UK declare war on the EU for not letting them do trade deals when we signed the agreement with the withdrawal agreement and Article 50? Kind of be hypocritical for our government to take the EU to war over something that we actually signed and was happy to sign.
Mean, technically, we didn't sign up for the EU. That got formed around us while we were signed up for the customs union.
The economic, yeah.
The EU itself wasn't a thing. When we signed up for the common market, which is what I meant, the EU wasn't even thought of yet. It formed around us while we were still signed. So technically, we never signed up for the EU.
Yeah, no, I do agree. It's just...
Yeah, so
with most of the other things that have, should we say, succeeded since we signed up to the common market and economical area.
No, the thing is, that's where I want to bring it back to your point about hypocrisy.
Yes.
Because you've got people like Jeremy Corbyn, what's his face, George Osborne, Joe Swinson, all saying that because we didn't vote to join the EU, because the EU wasn't a thing, it formed around us, back in 08 and 09, that we should have an in or out referendum to decide whether we want to join or to carry on being a part of it or to leave. I mean, here we are a decade later, well, not even a decade later, 7, 8 years later, we have a referendum on that very issue, and now they're saying that they want to stay. It's like, hang on a minute, quit flip-flopping. You flip-flop worse than a woman on a holiday.
I suppose with Joe Swinson, and I can find the article if people really want, but her husband, believe it or not, received as a what do you call it when you're at the top, CEO of a particular company that got £3.8 million for the EU, and you wonder why Joe Swinson wants to remain in the EU.
Yeah. The thing is, that's why most of them want to remain in the EU, because they get cushy EU pensions at the end of their career.
Yep.
And obviously us leaving will be they'd get rid of that.
I would still like you to come on, Mr. Carbon Point, when you can. Yes, please. I understand that it's a bit busy for you, mate. So when you're ready to come on, just pop on. I sent you the link on Twitter, so you're more than welcome. Tim Tarbox, I will very, very quickly address your question, and hopefully Kai will have a point afterwards. Whose side would the US take in a civil war between the UK and the EU? To be fair, first of all, technically it wouldn't be a civil war because we are still our own nation, and a civil war means that nation versus nation, it's two factions inside of a nation that are fighting for supremacy of that nation. Where
it'd be basically like London and the rest of the UK.
Yeah. Technically it wouldn't be a civil war, but I do understand what you mean. Breaking of the union. Civil war comes from what you mean as states, where technically we're still sovereign nations, so we're not technically states. We're still technically independent, technically, if you want to go down that road.
Big, huge quotation marks.
Yeah. But it depends on who's president. If Barack Obama was president, I would have said that he would have stuck with the EU. I would honestly actually say that with Donald Trump in power, I would actually say that he would pick the UK, if I'm going to be honest with you. If I'm going to be honest with you, I think that he would actually do that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. He's already said that once we leave, he wants us to leave the EU. He said that we should just fuck them off out of it and just leave. And when we do leave, we'd be in first or rather, they'd want to be first in line to offer us new trade deals.
Yeah, I mean, I was having this conversation with somebody who does apparently does economics. I say apparently because his idea of trading was very, very interesting. But anyway, it's Twitter. It doesn't always. People are not always what they seem to be. But
I'm exactly what I am.
Yeah, well, same here. I'm just some bozo on the internet pretending I know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
But the gentleman who I was speaking to was coming across to say that with the trade deals themselves, what was it that I was actually trying to... What was the point that you made just before? Sorry, I was in the middle of doing something.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
What point? When?
Just before I started talking, you made the point, and I was like, yeah, I was talking to this economic guy. I forgot what I was going to say.
Basically, Trump would take our side because obviously he'd want to offer us the best trade deals that we could have with America first.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely correct. I was talking to this economics guy, and he plastered about what the actual GDPs were around in the different trading blocks and trading groups. And we were still bigger than 80% of Asian markets. The only bigger was China. We were bigger than Australia, so Australia would want to trade with us. We were bigger than Canada, so Canada would want to trade with us. We were bigger than the whole of South America, so the whole of South America would want to trade with us. That doesn't include the fact of the Commonwealth that we already have technically as our own trading agreements around the world anyway. And yet this person was trying to say to me that we had no idea what trading groups that we were going to have. And I was just like, you're a moron. You're an absolute moron. You're absolutely trying to say the worst outcome is what you think it's going to be, rather than just saying people will want to buy stuff off of us and we will want to buy stuff off of other people. Even if we were to reject the whole of the European market, which nobody is ever saying that we should do, we would still be able to compensate the market we have with the rest of the world, and probably at cheaper prices.
Yeah. I mean, what Boris Johnson basically wants for the UK at the moment, not at the moment, but you know what I'm trying to say. What he wants for the UK at the moment is, there's that word again. So it's just on my brain. It's basically low tax, high income. Basically, you can go out and earn, but tax people low, because that way do you get start economy booming, and then you slowly start generating it. It's basically to avoid people going into downfall and crashing out and doing things like that. It's to basically give people a bit more spending power to buy what they want, to buy what they need, and obviously keep their lives as normal as possible. And I think that's obviously a great thing. I mean, less government impositions and less government taking your money is always a good thing.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I do find it very interesting that with the two, should we say, party conferences that have happened with the Liberal Democrats, which was an absolute shit show. The only thing that they actually put down as policy was the fact that they were going to be the Remain campaign if there was a general election after they voted to get the Ben Act through and whatnot.
Yeah.
Which amazing policy, guys. You're the Liberal Democrats. Well done.
They're neither liberal nor democratic.
Surprisingly. And then you have Labour's policy, which was, we are the workers, we are the party of the workers. So what we're going to do is we're going to destroy public schools, destroy Ofsted. We are going to take away private property. And there's a couple of other things that we're going to do as well. Oh, by the way, we're also going to try and get the best deal we can, but also trying to take away everything else like that I've said before. No other policies. All it was taxing the rich and taking away private property. No policies whatsoever to make infrastructure better, whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
now, don't get me wrong. Sorry.
You got their slogan, for the many, not the few. I mean, technically, by saying you want to cancel Brexit and go against Brexit, you're going for the few, not the many, because the many voted for Brexit.
Yeah, by definition.
But yeah, by definition.
Yeah.
So it's like, stop being hypocritical. Just say what you've got to say.
And it's exactly that.
Crumple point is on.
I need to go back. I need to send him on. Add him to the screen. You're ready to come on whenever you are, mate. The mic's free.
Hello.
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 Who am I on with?
You're on with the Common Sense guy and Kay. Or Kai, sorry.
Have I met Kai before?
Yes.
That's not awkward.
Sorry.
Yeah, you've met each other before. We've actually talked on men's rights issues before.
I thought I recognised the voice.
Yeah. So, just a quick point. I was going to continue with the Conservatives, even though they haven't completely and utterly flushed all of their policies out, because it's Boris Johnson. He generally doesn't fucking do that because he's a numbskull when it comes to that. But he still says that he's going to try and put in 4 hospitals to start off with that he can afford now, and then try and build another 20 to 30 hospitals afterwards. Admittedly, hasn't found the funding yet, if we're going to be honest and be truthful. But the intention is actually there for that to happen. So, great policy. He's also doing, as Kay said before, about the police. He's also going to be doing other bits and pieces, as well as actually following the democratic results. Now, if you were to look at those party conferences completely apolitical and without the context of Brexit, who's actually put down some bloody policies out of that party, out of those party conferences?
Conservative.
Yeah.
There's only one party, and that's unfortunately the Conservatives.
Something that hacks me off about the Boris situation.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things, but if you go around people, it's harder in Scotland, as I'm sure you can imagine, when it comes to the Tories. But
yeah,
generally, it makes me laugh because I can tell basically how suggestible a person is by whether or not they currently like Boris or not. Because the thing is, like, a year and a half ago, everybody liked him. So if they now don't, it means that they get their opinions and thoughts from the television.
Yeah, true.
Which is obviously a bit of a broad brushstroke, but you see what I mean? Because it's like even Scots who hate the Tories as like some kind of weird occult rite of passage, you have to, cross yourself, say the Lord's Prayer and denounce the Tories. And it's like, even them, it was always a case of, oh, fucking, do you want Ian Duncan Smith, Chris Grayling, Theresa May, or Boris Johnson? And everybody would unanimously say, oh, Boris Johnson, he's a bit of a fucking idiot, but like he's all right, And sure enough, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months down the line, they're all now like, oh, that evil Nazi fascist person. It's like, yeah, you're so full of shit. Just plug yourself into the BBC by hardwire yourself in, save everybody the trouble.
Been watching too much mainstream media.
Yeah. Well, now we've got the full panel here, so to speak. I'm going to save the rest of the Brexit discussion for probably around about 10 minutes time. Hopefully, if I can do this right, we should be all right. I should be doing that. There we go. Then I thought it'd be interesting to have a quick say about this, if that's all right with everyone.
That minister was having a heavy flow.
It's definitely having a heavy flow, and you've got to go down on that because you've got to be happy with it.
No, thank you. I don't like blood. It's not just that. I don't like blood.
That's fair enough. Yeah, very, very quickly. Extinction Rebellion protesters use fire engine to spray Treasury with fake blood. Obviously, the reason for this is the environmental campaign group Extinction Rebellion had used a fire engine to spray the front of the Treasury building with fake blood. The group unfurled a banner urging the government to stop funding climate death. I'll get to that in a second. We'll get back to that in a minute. And said they had 1,800 litres of blood at the central London building. Although most appear to have ended up on the street and the pavement because,
environment.
Yeah, they care about it. It's just throwing paint all over the floor and in the drainage system, and possibly
that's not going to be bad for the environment, is it?
Well, yeah, they care. So while standing on the front, on the top of a fire engine, protesters struggled to control the hose. Yeah, they did. As it whipped around on its own accord, police later turned up to protect the building, and 4 people were arrested on suspicion of criminal damage. So
Common sense guy, was the hose mad?
the hose were very mad. They almost had a thought come into their mind.
Sorry, dad joke o'clock.
But yeah, I mean, apart from the idiocy that is climate death, which I'm probably an advocate, well, I am an advocate of people looking after their shit and cleaning up after themselves and whatnot. But I mean, what the fuck is climate death? And how is the government funding climate death when we have the UK has literally become the lowest carbon administrator, people that produce emissions in the world? So
Well,
what more can the
the
government
thing
do?
is, these guys are pretty switched on, because I was at the climate death budget meeting last week, and we were discussing in depth, like, what bits of the environment we were going to kill, and how long it would take, how much money we were going to allocate. So these guys, they've got friends in high places, and they know what we're up to. And I have to say, enemies as we may be, my respect is with them for managing to be such worthy opponents. Much like the feminists when they discovered our patriarchy meetings, the climate death meetings. It's quite impressive. We go to a lot of trouble,
Completely and utterly. But I mean, I don't even say joking, because I do think that what they're trying to do is hyperbolically say that is literally what the government is doing. But I suppose going into a slightly bit of depth deeper, that would be really worrying if they actually believe that that the government is actually having climate death meetings that they are funding.
I can imagine Greta talking about it now.
How dare you!
How dare you attend these secret climate death meetings? You have stolen my idea.
You have stolen my idea. To be fair, you kind of sounded German then, but
yes,
I know. It's because she hisses so much, and my Hitler impersonation always involves a lot of hissing and spitting. So,
I mean,
sorry.
I do find that really interesting. The whole thing with Greta, I mean, and this in general, it's so pushed as hypersensitive. It's so pushed it's so in your face. It's so, this is the worst that could ever happen. People are literally burning to death. No, they're not. People are literally dying for climate. It's like, no, people are literally going to become extinct.
No.
Well, they don't care about people becoming extinct. They just want the Earth to be green. Like they don't actually give a shit whether any of the people on it survive.
Do you know what I was reading something earlier, which was that we shouldn't eat meat anymore, but we should eat insects.
Oh, I saw an article like that a while ago. It was it got invaded by.
Before you go any further, think of this logically. Is an insect not a fucking animal?
Yes.
So if we can't eat cows, why are we allowed to eat insects?
Well, because somebody put it quite well on the internet. I saw that they were saying that you need to remember, we all know that it's nothing really to do with the environment, and it's this kind of just primal scream. But this guy actually pointed out, well, actually the point is to humiliate you because you're their political enemy. So it's not just that you can't have the things you want; it's that you have to then be reduced to eating bugs before them.
I just found that really hypocritical, because I've heard that argument before. Oh, don't eat meat, but you could eat synthetic meat, or you could eat insects. It's like, so you're saying that I can't kill a cow, but I can eat and kill an insect.
Well, they're not saying you can't eat and kill a cow. They're saying you'd have to pay exorbitant amounts of money and have huge social status to eat a cow, which is, what the communists do in places like Cuba, where you'll get murdered by the government if you eat beef or rear cows without permission. You'll go to jail and possibly for you're talking like murder sentences, like life in prison for eating beef and shit like that.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the Castros eat as much beef as they like. So, and the thing is, like, I noticed with the climate strike that it just seems to be. Somebody was talking to me about like, oh, the communists always creep in. It's not them that's the problem. And I was like, no, it's actually backwards from what used to happen. Because common sense guy and Kay, you'll remember back whenever there was any kind of march or protest, everybody there was probably quite normal, and then there was a couple of crazy socialist workers who would just hand out flyers, and they thought it was all their thing, but they were a minority. But now what it is I think that like communism stuff have become so distasteful to the general public that these people are like masquerading as other ideologies, but it's all the tenets of socialism, and environmentalism as it is in current year is one of those things, because they don't want people like this panel who are like, oh yeah, pollution's terrible, deforestation's terrible, but I'm not convinced about the whole climate change thing. They don't want you then. Even if you agree on 99% of stuff, you have to believe everything.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you try saying to these people that climate changes already exist. If it didn't, we would still be in the midst of an ice age. And they say, but this is different. It's like, no, it's not. What these people fail to realise is, if you can even go check it out, the Earth naturally heats and cools itself. Because obviously it's a natural living being. If it senses it gets too hot, it will start to cool itself like it's doing.
Well, and they call us science deniers, but they've been wrong about everything. Like they believe in models that are not based on science. They're made by scientists, but they're just models, right? So when the science doesn't support their claims, they just change the name of it. Because remember, it was global cooling, then it was global warming, and then it was the ozone, and then it was climate change, because like that's easy enough to swing by people because the climate's always changing. But like the number of people I've spoken to, like honestly in real life, this has actually happened a number of times where they've been going on about like the polar ice caps melting, which they're not, by the way.
No,
but
they're getting thicker.
Yeah, exactly. And then people go on about that, and then they say, and about I said, so do you think the oceans are going to rise as well because of that? And they're like, well, yeah, obviously. I'm like, right. Have you ever had a glass of water that was full of ice, and then when the ice melts, it overflows? And they're like, oh, fuck, right enough. Like, it's like, yeah, I'm such a science denier, and you didn't even think about that. And that's just one example. I don't want to reduce the whole argument. I'm not trying to strawman them, but like that has happened to me on. I can think of 2 occasions recently.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm with both of you. I do think that it's very interesting. I know of a actual letter that got sent to the EU last week that had over 500 scientists that actually support this letter and signed it and countersigned it. I actually downloaded the PDF for it. That actually states that there is not a climate crisis as has been put up. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. They're scientists, but again, I find it interesting that they can't have the scientific debate. The consensus is that this is correct, so anybody that's now against it is now thrown out of the consensus.
Well, you make a good point.
Remember, right? Science was never a consensus. It was peer-reviewed study, and the work was able to justify itself, not people agreeing with Jim and Tom and saying that Jim and Tom are right because Jim and Tom. The science is supposed to be correct, not the consensus.
Yeah.
I cut you off.
Well, this is the UN we're dealing with as well, right? This isn't scientists and businesses run by scientists. This is the UN, which is a government that rules other governments. And the other thing is, like, I loved how they portrayed Greta as this like rebel taking them to task, and they were going to change their ways because of what she's. It's like they put her there. The UN doesn't let people speak in front of the General Assembly who are against the UN. Like, when has that ever happened? The UN picks people that it wants to speak to them to further their own ends. And it's like these climate strikes were incredibly well organized and incredibly well funded. And even with this stunt they've pulled, like it wasn't that well organized as we've seen, but it's like nothing's going to happen to these people. Like, general acts of vandalism, especially against government buildings, are not really very well received usually. But like they arrested these people to stop them doing what they were doing, but they're not going to go to prison or anything like that.
No, definitely not. I mean, the thing is that I found very interesting, especially when talking to people about Greta. I have a problem with children being politicized and pushed to the forefront.
By anyone.
Yeah, by anybody. It doesn't matter if it's right or left, or centre or whatever. But my main problem with Greta is that, fine, she's a beacon for what maybe the youth is trying to talk about. I agree, maybe she is. But already moaning at people and countries are already doing their own versions of changing things and actually signing up to different accords or doing their own thing to change their CO2 emissions, even though that directly doesn't correlate to climate change overall. But they are doing their bits and pieces. She still doesn't come up with. Now, I'm not trying to say that she needs to, but if you're going to advocate for change, you might want to come up with an idea of how you want things to change. And no, that doesn't mean implement socialism and the Green New Deal. It means actually implementing a version of change that actually correlates with the systems we have in place now.
Yeah, like say, build nuclear energy plants and start and once they're up and functional, for every one nuclear power plant you put up onto the grid, you take one coal-powered off. That way it starts rotating and starts taking the coal out of the system.
Do you know what the easiest way to deal with this is? Plant more goddamn fucking trees. If you plant another billion trees in all countries, overall, not singular in each country, but overall, climate change and the CO2 emissions wouldn't even be a problem at the level we're at now.
There's an interesting point about that, is that there are now more forests on Earth than ever have been that we've been able to record, supposedly. I got that from humanprogress.org. So it's not it's not like I got it from Breitbart or something like that. It was maybe not the world, but it was like Europe or something like that has like more trees in it, and
South
America
correct.
and stuff.
The world is greening more. The world has been greening more.
And carbon encourages plant growth as well, which then encourages more oxygen, which is quite funny. Like like you said, there's no, but like it's. What year is it? Is it 4000 BC or is it 2019? Because like there's a child prophet being hailed by the masses and propped up by the elites, and the child prophet is telling us that the sun is angry and is going to burn us unless we give it sacrifices.
I tell you what, it actually sounds like the Aztecs.
Yeah.
It literally sounds like the Aztecs. We are now in Apocalypto. Thank God Mel Gibson fucking directed that piece of shit.
Yeah. I mean, have you guys also noticed that she comes over here and says to, obviously, basically the UK, the US, and all Western nations about sorting out their CO2, yet we are the ones that are actually doing it, while China and India are left alone, while China has increased their CO2 output by 207%.
Yeah. Also, as well, you have the Philippines, which is literally dumping tons of plastic into the ocean on a daily basis.
Yeah,
but I mean, that doesn't count.
No.
Yeah, I was looking at something. The World Health Organization obviously takes regular air quality measurements, and I'm pretty sure that something like 9 of the 10 worst air polluted places in the world are in China. It's something crazy like that. Yeah. And one of the cities in China, the scale only goes up to 500. So, like, to put that in perspective, I think roughly. Remember, there was a scare in London because of the air quality being so bad. That was like less than 50 on the scale, and it was considered some kind of public health emergency.
Yeah, I think it was.
Some of these places in China have like 150, 200, and one of the places had more than 500, and the scale stops at 500, right? Yeah. And like you say, they're coming over here and telling me, oh, yeah, you need yet another recycling bin, and to pay this much extra on your bus fare, and you're not going to be allowed this kind of car, and hell no, you're not getting Big Macs anymore. It's like, fuck off, we know your game.
I know he's a comedian, but Lee Evans says it best. Oh, sorry. You got big wigs getting private jets and chauffeur-driven cars to these public health meetings, or not public health, world meetings about climate change, etc., etc. And they reckon if I just turn my light off once a day, that will do something. or if I turn my TV off for standby?
Well, there's lots of different people that are speaking in universities. You can find them on YouTube and whatnot that are actually credited scientists and credited lecturers. It's not just, random guys like us that are talking about it. They're actually proper scientists and done field research and whatnot. But let's put this into perspective. When they talk at different lectures and they talk at different universities, one, they are generally ridiculed by the whole of the student body, as well as the tutors that actually allow them to come in. Generally, they are fighting their corner each way but Sunday. So let's just say that as a colloquial term that we can all understand.
Yeah.
And yet, they are called the climate deniers, even though they are showing more evidence, more facts, and yet they're the ones that are denying evidence and facts. Now, don't get me wrong; they could be wrong, but have you ever thought that you could also be wrong? There are no absolutes, remember, in science.
Well, that's
Yeah,
why it's
the thing
tied
is-
up with this like cultural Marxism stuff we're going through, though. Like, and this is the thing. Like, you and me are. I could speak for us too. I don't know about Kate, but like, we weren't brought up right wing. Like, I used to be one of these. I was totally signed up. I'm like, oh, global warming's a disaster. And it was like I'm still in agreement about the wildlife protections. Let's stop deforesting places and let's stop building these dams that drown wildlife. Blah 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 blah. I just don't believe in man-made climate change anymore. That's it. Like, I still believe in all the other stuff, and I used to believe in it, but through looking at the evidence, I thought, well, this is flimsy at best and outright false at worst. And like you say, it's like they call the scientists now the science deniers, but that's the whole point. It's like, well, the racists call people racist all the time. The people who refuse to not see race and just live by everything is about your immutable characteristics and gender as well, they're the ones that call racist and sexist on everybody. So are we really surprised that when this same group of people get involved in the climate, they call everybody else climate or science deniers? No, this is just what they do.
Yeah, it's just a way of just decrediting them straight away without having to deal with any of the aspects of what they found out.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the fact that they say that the science is settled, science is never settled. That's
Correct.
the beauty of science.
Yeah, no, I'm completely not in agreement with both of you.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have something settled that is never settled. I mean,
That's always changing. You mean always changing?
That's one. Thank you. I mean, they sit there and say that gender is a spectrum, all this, that, and the other, and if you obviously check, it's ever evolving, but if you do not agree with something that is settled and never changing, like the climate change bad, destroying the world, you're somehow denying science. It's like, how can you hold both of those views in your brain simultaneously?
It's called cognitive dissonance.
I mean, surely the logic part of your brain is working overtime to try and fit them both in. And no wonder they say, oh, they're also hot-headed. Heat's got to escape somewhere.
Eventually, yeah. I mean, we could probably talk about climate change and how it is or how it isn't affecting everything. I think, as Crumple Point's already said, we can all agree that the world needs to be cleaned up more. We've made a mess of the world on plastics, overforesting, and so on and so forth. I think everybody can agree to a certain aspect that we need to look after our planet a little bit more, if not a lot more, especially with animals and things like that. But I think that that's the point where we should all come together, whether you're left, right, if you're a climate denier or if you're not. I mean that as the way that we've talked about it. We can all agree on that aspect. So why can't we all work together on that notion and all work for our individual understanding of what we're doing, rather than trying to make it a unified movement? At least we're all doing the same thing, but for different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, while you're doing that, at the same time, you'll be helping the environment by promoting natural ecosystems to flourish, and it's a win-win in both situations.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree.
This is
right.
this is where I linked it back to the whole cultural Marxism thing, though. It's like it's about trashing social structure. It's this postmodern deconstructionist thing that we're going through right now, and this is just another part of it.
Yeah, it's why they simply won't go to China and say it, because China is already communist. There's no reason for them to go there to implement their communism, because it's already there.
Well, don't talk to Bloomberg about being democratic, because Bloomberg come out very, very recently when talking about the 70th anniversary, saying that China actually listens to its people. I mean, in Hong Kong, I mean, they don't, but everywhere else apparently they do.
Well, the corporate world is just as infested with this mentality as everything else.
Yep. No, I completely agree. Carry on. I'm just sorting things out anyway for the letter.
Come off that for a second, because I just read that first reply to his tweet.
Oh. Right.
There is no majority anymore for Brexit. The people have changed their minds like you did. We need a second referendum. No, we don't. And the fact that Boris Johnson is 41% in the polls because he's saying he will deliver Brexit kind of indicates that people haven't changed their mind.
I completely agree. I mean, his actual is Brexit smells. So let's be honest, we kind of know what he's all about just by that point. Yeah. So, if you wanted to just wrap up on climate, we'll get on to this letter and then we can carry on.
Yeah.
If you wanted to finish off, then I'm more than happy with that.
No, I'm done with the. I'm done with the climate.
Yes, I'm done screaming at the sun as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think all on the count of three, we should all say "How dare you?" 1, 2, 3. How dare you? Right, carrying on. So this is to dear John Claude. No last name, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister. Interesting. A fair and reasonable compromise. UK proposals for a new protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. So, first of all, I'm kind of disappointed that the letter itself seems to just focus on the backstop, where we still had other monies and other issues that needed to be addressed as well. But we'll see if anything actually pops up. I don't suppose it will, but we'll have a look. I'm already disappointed, amazingly. So there is now very little time in which to negotiate a new agreement between the UK and the EU under Article 50. We need to get this done before the October European Council. This government wants to get a deal, as I'm sure we all do. If we cannot reach one, it would represent a failure of statecraft for which we would all be responsible. Our predecessors have tackled harder problems. We can surely solve this one. Both sides now need to consider whether there is significant willingness to compromise. I like that language there, actually, to be fair. And move beyond the existing positions to get us to an agreement in time. We are ready to do that, and this letter sets out what I regard as a reasonable compromise. The broad landing zone in which I believe a deal can begin to take shape. Interesting. I do quite like that deal, because that kind of shifts the impetus onto the EU, saying that Boris Johnson and his government are willing to compromise beyond their existing positions. So that kind of already says that he's, at least in my opinion, willing to give ground on certain issues, but also flips it onto the EU, saying, look, I'm willing to talk about this. You're not. Kind of your fault. I mean, what do you guys think on that before we move forward?
Yeah.
I think the sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead first.
I think the backstop thing's just I'm sick of hearing about it, but frankly, it's, if you look at the media coverage, etc., it's the thing that they keep jumping on, because they can't justifiably jump on anything else. Everything else is, to use the word from the previous discussion, settled. The vote has been had. The ramifications of Article 50 are clear. So the only thing that they've got to really jump on is this backstop thing. I think it was you and me, CSG, that we're talking about before. Like what we need to do is we need to just have a border, a hard border at the Irish border, but like disgustingly underfund it, and then that way everybody's happy. So like give them like 10 grand to build the whole thing, you know, and then everybody's happy.
Well, from what I understand, he's kind of not put a border at all for Northern Ireland, but also continued Northern Ireland into a form of a single market, which kind of technically breaks the Good Friday Agreement by saying that they're not part of the union because they're under different law. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Our proposed compromise removes the so-called backstop. In the previous withdrawal agreement, I have explained the difficulties with this elsewhere, including the fact that it has been rejected 3 times by the UK Parliament. Equally importantly, in this context, the backstop acted as a bridge to a proposed missed a bit, future relationship with the EU, in which the UK would be closely integrated with the EU customs agreement and would align with the EU law in many areas. That proposal, future relationship, is not the goal of the current UK government. The government intends that the future relationship should be based on a free trade agreement in which the UK takes control of its own regulatory affairs and trade policy. In these circumstances, the proposed backstop is a bridge to nowhere, and a new way forward must be found. Again, I don't really disagree with anything on that aspect. What about you guys?
I can't really say I disagree.
Sounds fair to me.
Fair enough.
I mean, I've just been looking at the polls. Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party at the moment are on 35%. Their closest to them are Lib Dems on 23%, and then after that is Labour on 21%.
Basically, they would have 145 to 155 majority.
Yeah. But apparently there's no consensus or no mandate for Brexit anymore.
Yeah, according to
Remainers.
Yeah.
But I like that. The only party that's directly calling to get Brexit result and respected and done are the ones that are in the lead. So
yeah. No, I completely agree.
It's a funny thing about the polling, right? Because the first past the post thing, the Tories have always been in favour of that, and all the other parties have wanted proportional representation or whatever. And it's quite funny that the Tories are the ones that always want first past the post. I can understand that there's pros and cons for all of it, and we can talk about them another time. But the thing is that the Tories would actually have an advantage if they were to have some kind of PR, because what they forget is that in Scotland, a vote for not the SNP doesn't count, because the SNP always win the majority of seats, if not all of the seats. But that doesn't mean they obviously, like, if you tally up all the votes, they're not the only party getting votes, obviously. Labour and Conservatives and other smaller parties get a large number of votes, but because they only need, you're only playing for the seat, you're not playing for the number of votes. It doesn't matter. So if you had some kind of PR, the Tories might actually have a couple of Scottish seats, because from what I'm seeing, they're actually polling in reasonable numbers. And if you look at some places in Scotland, if it's a non-Labour seat and it's an SNP seat, chances are, depending on what part of the country you're talking about, it used to be a Tory seat, which is an interesting thing that nobody ever seems to talk about.
I mean, the thing with the representation is actually really good for the Tories, because as far as I'm aware, on almost every general election that I've ever seen or watched, they normally win the most constituencies, generally, which means that they would generally, if it was to do with representation, would generally be government most of the time, because it's only London and big cities that have the majority of the number for votes. So I think it's very interesting that the party that doesn't and wouldn't actually benefit from representation is actually pushing for it, and the party that, as you said, that would massively be happy with it is actually saying, no, we don't want that. I do find that very, very interesting.
Yeah, and sorry, just to lend the representation point to like something we were actually saying, and the reason I started thinking about it was because I was thinking about like the government trying to actually get this stuff through without getting shot down in Parliament, and it was obviously the fact that the SNP and Labour are acting as essentially an informal coalition to vote against the government all the time, and so realistically nothing's getting done because of that.
Oh, that's not really working, is it? I was trying to get the paper a little bit more, but apparently that didn't want to work. No,
Can't you just zoom in with your browser?
Yeah, but carrying on. Right. Yeah. Accordingly, we are now proposing a new protocol on Northern Ireland. We are delivering the draft legal text of this protocol to Task Force 50. Oh, impressive name. Sorry. I attach an explanatory note giving further detail of the proposal, and I am making this letter and that note public today. It is based around 5 elements. First and foremost, our proposal is centered on our commitment to find solutions which are compatible with the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. This framework is a fundamental basis for government in Northern Ireland, and protecting it is the highest priority for all. So good. I think that we can all agree on that. That's a good thing. Second, it confirms our commitment to long-standing areas of UK-Ireland collaboration, including those provided in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, but also others in some cases predating the European Union, the common travel area, the rights of those living in Northern Ireland, and North-South cooperation. These were set out in the previous protocol and should be maintained in the new one. Very interesting. When people have been saying for a long, long time that there is no way of being able to put any legislation into place that would be quick enough. Boris Johnson, to me, has absolutely pulled one out of the fire here by saying, well, we already have legislation that predates the European Union. We can just put that back into practice again.
Yeah.
That's quite good.
It's like when you try to set up new rules, they don't work, so you go, fuck it, we'll go back to the old ones. And it's like nothing ever stopped.
Well, we're signed up to so many bodies that, like, you just look at the World Trade Organization situation. Everybody's like, oh, what are we going to do about trade deals, blah, blah, blah. It's like, we just default to the World Trade Organization rules. That's like, and if that sounds like a simplistic answer, it's not because I'm being difficult, it's because it's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, we already had those terms on our deal before we joined the customs single, whatever.
Yeah, and the EU has to obey them as well.
Yeah,
like the EU has to obey the World Trade Organization rules. The only thing that would change is that we would not be acting as a bloc, and we wouldn't need their permission to, scratch our nose and fart.
Yeah, 86% of all trade deals in the world have the World Trade Organization rules set as their foundation for the trade.
Yeah,
as far as I remember from from 2016 when they were talking about World Trade Organization rules. But yeah, no, I find it very interesting that most people's arguments for Northern Ireland and Ireland is that, they would never be able to be put any legislation in quick enough to be able to sort this out. And as I said, I'm really impressed by Boris Johnson. I know it's not him necessarily that's done this, it's staffers and things like that as well. But I'm very impressed with that he's like, well, no, we're just default to the previous rules that we had before.
Okay.
And that kind of spits in the eyes at anybody that says, we can't put legislation into place. It's like, it's already there. It just predates.
Well, this is the very badass sounding Task Force 50 is a huge... I don't know precisely what he means by Task Force 50, but I do know that what has been happening for about a year and a half now is lots and lots and lots of civil servants have been going about, and they are not allowed to publicly discuss fully what they're doing, but they've been going around and basically setting up the they've been investigating what they would need to do at the borders, at the ports, at the on the trade side of things. All this medical supply nonsense, and they've been coming up with solutions, and all the solutions are as simple as you'd expect them to be. And the other thing that they've been doing is keeping track of trade deficits and where they think tariffs and stuff might pop up. And so because they've been doing that, and the EU knows they've been doing that, and the government knows they've been doing that, so what's actually, there's what's going on and there's what the media reports to be going on. So the media are reporting this picture of disarray and madness and 28 days later. And what's actually happened is basically everything that needs to be in place will be in place. It's already been settled.
Yeah.
It would basically be a harmless transition. And while I've got the mic, I've got to disappear for 5 minutes, so I'll be back then.
Yeah, no problem, mate. See you soon.
Yep.
It's going to be a more than harmless transition because one of the things they've been tasked with doing, with what I was saying about trade deficits, is I can't remember precisely how it was explained to me, but basically they've been also, because they've had to investigate that, one of the things they do, and I can't remember the technical name for it, but they look at if the tariffs and trade duties and stuff are fair on certain things. So if one country produces, I don't know, fucking Jaguar cars, and we're producing Jaguar cars. I know we're not, but you know what I mean? I know that's not possible, but we're producing the same thing. And if they're going to put a tariff on ours that is unfairly high because they also produce it, and they're an EU country, that is in some kind of conflict with the WTO and the EU rules. So these civil servants have been looking into that sort of thing as well. So we're actually going to be, if we do come out and this plan gets implemented, we're actually going to be in a better trading position than in many ways we are now. Obviously, there's going to be upset and it's going to be a bit crazy for a little while, but there's stuff that's coming to light through these investigations that they just didn't know and hadn't occurred to them to fix before.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I mean, they've been doing it for so long of trying to sort out all of these transition periods. And as you said, making sure the deficits are correct, making sure who owes what and who owes this and who owns that they've been able to transfer everything quite easily. And I think people forget that though governments are not always good, when it comes to the point of, actually trying to make sure that people are looked after, because otherwise they'll lose their jobs, generally government, looks after themselves. That in turn looks after the people. Just by proxy, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is that the government can move incredibly quickly, and it's that sort of you hear the conservatives and libertarians going on about it. It's like if the government wants to take away something that's yours, they can do it in about 6 hours. But if they want to actually do something productive or give you something back, it always we need to have meetings about meetings, and we need to have a 2-year waiting period and a long investigation. It's like, you know what I mean? When they want to do something that does it gives them power and fucks you over, they can do it in a day.
Yeah. No, completely and utterly with you. It's amazing how powerful government really can be and how quickly, as you said, it moves. Speaking of quickly moving, moving on to fourth. Fourth is the regulatory zone must, underlined, depend on the consent of those affected by it. This is essential to the acceptability of arrangements under which part of the UK accepts the rules of a different political entity. It is fundamental to democracy. We are proposing that Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly should have the opportunity to endorse those arrangements before they enter into force. That is, during the transition period and every 4 years afterwards, if contest. Oh, my computer wants to fucking reset. Amazing. Wait an hour. Just an hour. And every 4 years afterwards, if consent is not secured, the arrangements will lapse. The same should apply to the single electricity market. Am I reading that correctly?
It's too small on my screen to read. But so is he saying that this will need voted on by our parliament every 4 years?
I believe he's saying that what happens between Northern Ireland. So we were just talking about the idea that everything between Northern Ireland and Ireland will go back to the arrangements that they had prior to joining the EU that was set up via the Good Friday Agreement. And Northern Ireland itself, with its own executive and its own assembly, will be able to vote on the idea of the Good Friday Agreement, as in principle, the trading bloc and the protocols that are going on that now reverting back to the way it was. We'll be able to vote on it every 4 years. That's
good, because we know that Labour and the Lib Dems love democracy, so they'll be right behind this, won't they?
Exactly.
Direct democracy, more voting, more say, more frequent exercises of democratic will. They'll be 100% behind this.
You'd like to think so. As far as I'm aware, they've all said that the deal was absolute shite. But I have a very good interview from LBC that was talking to the vice president of the EU. That's interesting. We'll get to that after we've done this, if we have time.
I am back.
Hello, mate. We're just moving on to the fifth and final under these arrangements. We're just moving on to that bit.
Okay.
So fifth and finally, under these arrangements, Northern Ireland will be fully part of the UK's customs territory, but not the EU customs union. So there is a massive separation there. So it's trying to say that Ireland and Northern Ireland will revert to the way that it was before we joined the EU officially under the customs union, and will revert back to the way that the Good Friday Agreement already had as trading blocks and all that sort of stuff. So he's now saying that that's what they're going to keep as their economic trade union. So they're now calling that the UK customs territory. Not the EU customs union. After the end of the transition period, it has always been a fundamental point for this government that the UK will leave the EU customs union at the end of the transition period. We must do so whole and entire. Control of trade policy is fundamental to our future vision. I don't quite like that, because he's saying that the implementation period is going to be 4 years. I don't quite like that.
I mean, they always.
Well, I guess that's just going to be for the purposes of. Firstly, I guess you could say he's electioneering a little bit, because he's going to be banking on the fact that we'll want him in charge to oversee the plan. But I guess it's also a case of this is going to have to be phased in. Like going back to what we were saying about how quickly they can move. They can legislate this in a day, but it might this is a lot of paperwork and a lot of materials and a lot of probably staff training and shit that will have to change. So I can see why there'd be I'm with you. I'm suspicious of it, but I can. If he's saying it's going to be implemented on day one, but it will take a while to be, for the shite to come out of the system and us to have a fully new system again, I can see the logic of it. But yeah, no, I'm a bit suspicious. I'm with you there.
Yeah. What about UK?
I was going to say, they always said whatever happened or whatever was decided during the negotiation periods would take a little while to implement, because obviously you cannot do everything just straight off the bat. It does take time. So I can see where he's coming from, where he say it would take a while to get it done, because you can't just cut everything and that's it. And it does take time to implement. It's taking the 3 years to try and implement the vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, right? Because why does 4 years seem like a long time? It seems like a long time because they've already been dragging their fucking feet since 2016?
Yeah.
So
over 3 years.
Yeah, so if this letter had been written back then, we would be seeing the end of this process now.
Yeah,
exactly. So it's not exactly that long of a time when it comes to this sort of thing. It's actually rather quick.
I'm just wondering if, the withdrawal agreement, that it can be extended by both parties, or needs to be agreed to be extended by both parties, or collapsed by both parties. It didn't really seem to go into that, but we still got more to read, so maybe that's going to be explained. This is entirely compatible with maintaining an open border in Northern Ireland. Goods trade between Northern Ireland and Ireland make up a little over 1% of the UK-EU total trade in goods. It is entirely reasonable to manage this border in a different way. That's very good use of statistics there as well. That, why is the EU so bothered about a trade barrier or a barrier between the Northern Ireland and Ireland when it's only literally 1% of any trading goods? It seems it's more of a political grandstanding than it is actually to worry about, trade.
Well, this is why I was really disgusted by the EU's and the opposition parties in this country stance on this, because it's the fact that they are dangling over everybody's heads the fact that the Irish have had a horrendous time of it for the last 100 years, bordering on civil war many times, multiple terrorist attacks, lots of gang violence, and paramilitary groups. And they're dangling that over everybody's head because, as you say, it's not about trade. And legally speaking, it's a very minor sort of unorthodox border arrangement. So what's really the problem here? The problem here is terrorism, and they're dangling that over everybody's head.
Pretty much. Well, the threat of terrorism, as in the unionists would want to try and take control again. Because, I mean, in a nice way, not to drug up the whole Troubles incidents and that again, it seems that only one side would be interested in trying to, should we say, unionize Ireland, and the others don't seem to be that bothered about, expanding their empire, if you will.
Well, you can look at it both ways, because the thing is, if you look at it from the Northern Irish perspective, or like whoever the baddies are on their side, it's like if they see the implementation of a hard border, then they can start pushing for like full split. You know what I mean? It reignites everything again. Because you've got the people who want a fully unified country, they're going to see this as an opportunity, and if you put a hard border there, then the people in Northern Ireland who want rid of the Republican side, they're going to be like, we have a hard border now. Now is the time to act, because look, we've got an actual barrier going on here. Let's do it. And it'll just both of these groups of maniacs will find a reason, and if nothing else, because it's topical and everybody's angry about it. And the disgusting thing is the EU are fully aware of this, and as are the opposition parties in this country, and they're dangling that over everybody's head, and they think that that's amusing.
Yep. No, completely not agree with you, and that's exactly the same thing that I feel disgusted about it as well. Do you have anything to say on this, Kay, before I move on?
No, Crample Point said everything I was thinking, so there's no point just reiterating.
Apologies.
No, you said it far better than I ever could.
Kiss ass.
It's the stutter.
It is entirely reasonable to manage the border in a different way. Any risk arising will be manageable in both the EU single market and the UK market. Interesting. Particularly as all third country imports will continue to be controlled by the EU and UK customs authorities. We are proposing that all customs processes needed to ensure compliance with the UK and EU customs regimes should take place on a decentralized basis, with paperwork conducted electronically as they move between the two countries, and with the very small number of physical checks needed conducted at trades. This is completely and utterly exactly the same as what they do at the port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands, obviously. Yeah. And why can't they do that in Ireland? Literally, the only reason is because they don't want to. There is no other reason for this if they don't accept that, because they already have precedent for accepting this type of customs check. Anybody else have anything to add to that? Or
no?
No? Okay, then. Premises or other points of the supply chain. To enable this, we should both put in place specific workable improvements and simplifications to existing customs rules between now and the end of the transition period. So that's pretty good, really, because that actually gives scope for change for both sides. So if they were to, which to be honest, I think this is a very bland, simple deal, but sometimes they're the best kind of deal. So don't think that I'm trying to belittle the deal. I think it's very simplistic and has a very good chance of going in both ways and could work in the way of the EU and it could work in the way of the UK. So I do think that the simplicity of the deal, or how it seems to be at the minute anyway, seems to be very good on both sides, and I think that's very good. It has scope for change in both directions. Not so good for us for thinking the EU side, but very good for us on the UK side, and I think that's a very good prospect. What about you guys?
Completely agree. Thing is, when it comes to this,
sorry, go ahead.
So I was only going to say, when it comes to this sort of thing, the EU needs to update itself. It's becoming outdated, as obviously you can tell with everyone wanting to leave. It's no longer functioning as it should, and something like this would update it. What's the word I'm looking for? As well as updating us as well. So it'll be both updating as we go our separate ways, which could work out for benefit of both of us.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, because contrary to what the news would tell you, people who voted leave are also quite keen to see European countries do very well. It's just that they want to see them do well as individual countries.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The thing that you said about it being a simplistic deal, it's not a simplistic deal in the sense that he's had to make this massive simplification of stuff that was already there, and it's not a simple deal in the terms of he's only touching one tiny part of the overall things that have to be done. He's making a really simple deal because there's really nothing complicated about the Article 50 situation.
Yeah.
They've made it complicated. It's the EU that is complicated. It's the 10,000 pages on legislation for selling cabbage that is complicated. Leaving and reverting to our previous arrangements and continuing our current arrangements with the WTO, the UN, etc., that's not complicated. And I think people are blown away by how simple this could potentially be. And also, these laws are so selectively enforced that even though there's a myriad of laws that we are agreed to and following and all that sort of shit, like, how many laws have we been repealing for the last 50 years that were just not enforced? Like, remember when you see all these silly things like it was legal to shoot a Scotsman on a Thursday in York on the wall on a Thursday, and that was legal until like 2007. And it's like, well, God does not fire a lightning bolt down and destroy you if the government breaks or fails to enforce a law. It just doesn't get enforced. And so if everything is working, but there's maybe still an EU law in the statute books, but nobody's paying any attention, like, that's all that happens. Nobody pays it any attention, and one day it gets repealed. It's like people, because they're in such a fever about this, because they want to be and because they've allowed themselves to be, are determined to make this more complicated than it is, and that's why the deal is so simple, alarmingly simple.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Moving on, because unfortunately time's starting to press on me a little bit. In the spirit of finding flexible and creative solutions to these particular circumstances, these arrangements can be underpinned by close cooperation between the UK and Irish authorities. All this must be coupled with a firm commitment by both parties never to conduct checks at the border in future. Interesting. Overall, we recognise that our proposal will mean changes from the situation that prevails in Ireland and Northern Ireland now. Our common task is to make sure that these changes entail as little day-to-day disruption as possible to the current situation. I believe that our proposal will achieve that. To be fair, I'm kind of with him. It seems like the proposal worked between the 70s up to the early 90s, so why can't it continue again now?
Did you
hear? Sorry, I keep doing that.
No, I was literally saying there is no reason.
Yeah.
That's all I had
Yeah,
to add. There is none.
Tony Abbott, did you see what he was saying on the radio the other day?
No.
No.
I don't know what station it was. It might have been LBC. It was one of these sort of call-in talk show type things. Anyway, it was Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister of Australia. And he was saying, like, Britain invented Parliament and it spearheaded the Industrial Revolution. It invented the English language, which is the international language. I think it'll manage. Like, and he was really nice about it, and he was like, "There's been so much defeatism in Britain, and as a foreigner, it's really as a foreigner that likes Britain, it's really disheartening to see." And he hopes it ends. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. I think that's the other good thing about Boris Johnson is, like, he's a good sort of actually you could compare him to Trump as well, in the sense that, like, who the hell knows in regards to tactician and legislator whether they're any good or not. But if they're being a good cheerleader and reassuring the populace, then the populace will do a good job and everything will get better. Like, Reagan was not a particularly good American president by many measurements, but he made everybody feel better and everybody did better.
Yeah. Much of it is just a state of mind.
Yeah, actually thinking that you can actually go off and you can do these deals, and because it does seem like with the Remainer side, and it's not a pick on Remainers at all, but it does seem primarily to be with that side that they somehow don't think that the United Kingdom can make it on its own, because for some reason they think that it's going to be isolated. It's like they honestly think that anybody that wants to leave and shut themselves off and not do any trade and not do any sort of migration or immigration at all, and just wants to, be Little Britain, as the media portrayed it as. And that by far is not what anybody that I know personally that voted leave wanted. Most people wanted a international world trade organizations and world trading in general, rather than just focusing primarily on one goddamn block. I think that it's interesting that a lot of Remainers seem so hyper-focused on trading with the EU that they forgot that there is another massive market already out there, and they're so scared of the unknown. I have said this before, but it's like trying to cut the aprons from when you're a child. No, I really do think that, because they're frightened to be able to take that risk by themselves. They're happy with the status quo and, being what already is, rather than trying to ascertain what could be or chase what could be. I think as a species overall, we've lost that determination to go and explore what can't, or what we think can't happen. We're happy where we are. We're stagnant. And I think this, in general, with the US and the UK politics, is actually a massive shake-up on actually making us realize that, no, we need to move forward again. We can't be happy where we are.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of conflicting motivations, and I think that's definitely one of the aspects. I think some of it is also, like, the EU does shit for people, and people like having shit done for them. So the people that like having shit done for them voted for the EU and can't stand the idea of the shit not being done for them anymore. Whereas the people that voted to leave are like, well, obviously we're the ones that will do the shit. Why are you worrying? But another part of it is, and this is my personal experience and true of many of the people I've spoken to about it. If you vote, the EU was this big, like, in the movies where they're like underwater or something, and then there's this like giant sea monster that's so big they can't even see it. That's like the EU. Like, it's been lumbering around us for so long, with its tentacles everywhere, that people, it's so huge people haven't even been able to see it, right? Because when I first got onto the whole EU thing, it was back in like 2010 or something, with when I first came across Farage, and I was like, oh, the EU, I've never really looked into it before. I knew it was I knew the name, and that's kind of it. So then I spent the next 6 years paying attention to what the fuck is the EU, realizing I didn't like it very much. So when the 2016 vote came about, I'd been aware of what it was and the fact I didn't like it for 6 years. Now,
yeah,
the Ramoners almost all of them only seem to have been aware of the fact that the EU was even a thing a year or so before the referendum. And then when the gravity of how huge this thing was hit them in 2016, and we were being asked to vote on it, they're like, it's so huge, you can't possibly, contend with something like this. It's clearly very important. And not all, but because some of the leavers were ignorant of the EU before that as well. But you know what I mean? It was less of a shock for the leavers because they were already pissed off at the EU quite a long time before the referendum, whereas the status quo people only just woke up and are in a panic.
No, yeah, I'm absolutely completely with you. And I think the idea of actually using the title Ramonas is a very good description. And no, it's not to belittle people that still want to remain and things like that. It's more of a case of people that did vote Remain have looked at the way that our own government is acting and the way that the European Union is acting. And I see on Twitter all the time, I see in the streets, I see with people that I know voted Remain now looking at the EU and going, just on principle, and if it does happen again, I'm going to vote Leave. And I really don't think that the liberal elite, the Champagne Socialists, or the London bubble, which I do primarily think that's where most of the Ramonas are, that it seems to be that they really don't understand that the worm is turning, as Thatcher would say. It really is, where people are really looking to the point of, right, I disagree with the reasons why this has happened, and I'm going to stick to principle. And my dad has been saying this for a long, long time. And if you're watching, Dad, hi. But my dad's been saying this for a long time. You can push the English or the British so far, and then they will react. And I think we're getting to the point where the British people are looking at our parliament and thinking, what the fuck is going on with our democracy? And they are getting ready to react by voting in an election when it happens, obviously.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's about the intangibles as well, like the national spirit as well, because it's I think people are kind of starting to realize what kind of what you've been saying, but on a more social level than a logistical one, because it's I watch a lot of history stuff, and I remember I was reading about watching a program about the Georgian era, and it's they tried to bring in a gin tax, and the fucking Prince of Wales drank a pint of gin in front of the taxman and refused to pay the tax, threw the glass on the ground and left. In front, the Prince of Wales in front of the taxman as a fuck you, and then the entire pub did the same thing behind him. And it's Britain was known as the bandit nation or something like that for around the world for so many years, because we just didn't give a fuck. We just got shit done, and then we've just become so domesticated over the last, say, 80 years or so that it's people are only just realizing how bad it's getting, and are hey, no.
Yeah, I mean, we get brought up our entire lives being told that what Guy Fawkes did was treason, but it turns out he was the one in the right. Parliament is a bunch of treasonous arseholes.
There's more to it than that. It's more of a religious aspect.
I'm simplicating it
a
little.
That's fair enough.
Or oversimplifying it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I understand. Oh, I suppose I better fucking carry on, because I'm going to have to drop the LBC interview, but I really want to get this letter done. So probably going to be on for another half an hour at the absolute bloody max.
Oh, that's fine. I have to go around 9ish anyway, so if we just fire on.
Yep. Right. Finally, in order to support Northern Ireland through the transition and in collaboration with others with an interest, this government proposes a new deal for Northern Ireland with appropriate commitments to help boost economic growth in Northern Ireland's competitiveness and to support infrastructure projects, particularly with a cross-border focus. Now, before I know I said that I want to press on, but I find this really interesting. Is he saying that the EU should be funding, as they have done before with particular projects, or is he saying that the UK is going to fund Northern Ireland? Because I find that really interesting, because it's saying that it wants a new deal for Northern Ireland. Does that mean it wants a new deal for Northern Ireland with the EU? Or
no, he wants he wants a new one with us. He said this government proposes a New Deal. In other words,
Yes,
it'll be a New Deal coming from us to them.
Yeah, but the reason why I asked this is because Northern Ireland is regulated by Westminster. It's why they're still considered part of Great Britain or the United Kingdom. Sorry, United Kingdom, not Great Britain. And this says to me that if they were writing this in a letter that they want a New Deal, why would they be saying that they want a New Deal between the UK and Northern Ireland? Surely that would be an internal matter that they would deal with themselves. Why would they be asking the EU or telling the EU that they want a New Deal and propose a New Deal for Northern Ireland, unless they want the EU to sort out a deal for Northern Ireland?
Because that's part of the backstop as well. Whether we can or support Northern Ireland as a independent sovereign nation. That's why they won't get rid of the backstop, because they feel like we can't do that. So if he says we're going to obviously strike up a New Deal and work things out that way, it's let them know that yes, we can continue our commitments to Northern Ireland that we've set out in the past, and hopefully they'll remove the backstop.
I'm going to read the beginning of this because I think the beginning of this is where maybe both of us are going a little bit lost. Finally, in order to support Northern Ireland through this transition, as in what we've just talked about the Good Friday Agreement being the basis for the trade and how they're going to be dealing with all that sort of aspects. And in collaboration with others with an interest, that would generally be the EU, this government proposes a New Deal for Northern Ireland with appropriate commitments to help boost the economic growth in Northern Ireland's competitiveness.
That to me says that they're going to because they respect that Northern Ireland has its own legislative power. The government, in collaboration with the European Union, are going to propose a new deal for Northern Ireland with the British government, so that they can, that goes back to the thing about them reevaluating this every 4 years, and it's obviously them that are going to have to decide what their border and immigration and stuff is going to look like. So I think that's the British government are going to provide the Irish with a new deal, Northern Irish with a new deal in collaboration with the European Union.
Yeah, that makes more sense. That means that they would be asking the EU to help fund projects then.
And going what you said at the very start about this being a very conciliatory and compromising letter, that is kind of what he's saying. He's making the EU have to cooperate or look very stupid. Like, they're going to have to be reasonable and help us help the Northern Irish, or they're going to have to purposefully and loudly say, "Oh no, we're not helping you," for reasons.
I mean, haven't they already done that?
Well, yes, but this is a new deal. This is a chance for to save face. So that's the point.
Yeah. That's fair enough. I mean, I think that makes more sense that they're going to have a three-way deal. So, or try and legislate a new three-way deal between Northern Ireland, the UK, and the European Union for the transition period. So, yeah, no, that sounds more logical. Still means that
because he's used the phrase "other interested parties," I'm assuming he's going to allow the Republic of Ireland to have some say in this as well, if they want.
They're part of. Yeah, well, they're part of the European Union, aren't they?
No, but
so they have
of course, but they still have their own legislative power, and it is a land. They're joined by
Well, no,
land, so they would have their own input, perhaps.
Remember, they wouldn't be able to do a trade agreement or trade deal or put new borders up without the EU's permission. So
no, but they could propose stuff in the deal. That's what I'm saying. It's like I think he's specifically left that phrase in there because he wants.
Oh no, I agree.
Yeah,
it's very telling that it's putting basically all of the onus onto the European Union. Well, I'm giving you all of these compromises. I'm even saying that you can help legislate and come into this deal and try and add bits and pieces to your own self, and you make sure everything's okay your end. So yeah, it's really.
Well, this is Boris's pattern. Like, if I had the misfortune of watching Laura Kuenssberg talking to Boris Johnson the other evening, And this is what he does. He says, "Look, here's my positive message. Here's what I'm doing. I'm going to talk to you about it, but I'm doing this anyway, and I would like you to get on board." And then she does her best Greta Thunberg impression and screeches at him, and is a rude bastard. Well, I'm sure she's convincing herself that she's asking the hard questions, but she was just a rude bastard. And he's like,
Yep.
"Well, okay, but I'm being positive, so you do what you like." And then she looks like a fucking tit, and that's what he's going to do with the EU as well. Because the thing is, he's being honest. He's willing to move on this. He's got plans in place. He wants help from other people. So the only option they have is to get on board or provide a better suggestion, or they can screech and look stupid. Those are their options. Because if he's going to be proactive and honest about it, as honest as a politician can be,
Yep.
then it's like, because he's got that. He puts them in this position because they don't have anything practical. They only have the rhetoric, whereas he's got the practical stuff in place, or at least he's letting on he does, before he comes to them for the conversation. You know?
No, I'm completely and utterly with you. Oh, right. That's right. Right, Kay, do you have anything else to add before I move on? Because I don't want to steamroll over you as well.
Nope, nothing to add.
Right, okay then. All right, taken together, these proposals respect the decision taken by the people of the UK to leave the EU, while dealing pragmatically with the decision's consequences in Northern Ireland and in Ireland. Bullet points, yay! They provide for continued regulatory alignment for a potentially prolonged period across the whole island of Ireland after the end of the transition period, for as long as the people of Northern Ireland agree to that. Interesting. Nope. Carry on. They mean that the EU rules cannot be maintained indefinitely if they are not wanted, correcting keys deficit to the backstop arrangements. Okay, that's fair enough. That answers my question anyway. I was going to say what, so we can stay in there for a prolonged period of time and for however long, but no, it's up to Northern Ireland if they stay in there. That's why they vote every 4 years. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
They provide for a meaningful Brexit in which the UK trade policy is fully under UK control from the start. They ensure that the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland will remain open, enabling the huge gains of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement to be protected, which kind of does, actually, to be fair.
Yeah.
I hope that these proposals can now provide the basis for rapid negotiations towards a solution, together with finalisation of the necessary changes to the political declaration reflecting the goal of a comprehensive free trade agreement, so that an Article 50 agreement can be reached and the UK can leave the EU in an orderly fashion on the 31st of October, with no ST on there. Amazing, Boris. This will allow us to focus on the positive future relationship that I believe is in all of our interests. And I am copying this letter, blah, 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 His Excellency. I didn't realize that Jean-Claude Juncker was an excellency. I thought he was just the Prime Minister, Emperor. I'm quite happy with that deal, to be fair. It's actually not that bad. I mean,
you
don't
see
get me
my
wrong, I know
point
it's
as well
deal.
about how, like, Boris has already rung the bell. Like, he's like, we're leaving on October the 31st, and it's happening, and we're committed. So, we would really appreciate your help, but otherwise, we're still going, and you'll look like fucking idiots, and we'll have to just struggle on through anyway, and it'll be entirely unnecessary. So he's already played his move, and they have to respond. There's the talking is over, and this is why our parliament are so, joining in with the climate activists by just screeching at the sun, because they're like, oh right, we're actually coming out, and the only way we can stop it is actually like overturning the government, but we don't want a general election. Oh shit, what are we going to do?
Yeah,
pretty much. I'm completely actually with both of you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still prefer a no deal, because then obviously it would give us more control over everything, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having a no deal, but I think if we're going to be pragmatic and actually look at it, we want to trade with Europe anyway. So why should we necessarily leave when we can offer the best of both worlds? And if they turn it down, then it's on their heads be, and then we still have the break anyway.
I mean, they've already technically turned it down.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that the exit deal was a thing sort of brought about by Theresa May and the media. So if we leave, like what he's proposing right now is a no deal. Because he's like, we're leaving, we would appreciate it if we could have some negotiation and, you know, get to work as soon as possible on, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like there's a bit in Article 50 that says at the end, deal or no deal. And then the deal is, you know, written out at the bottom of Article 50. It's a case of we would be leaving with no deal and then making new deals. Or we can make the new deals before we leave.
I mean,
but either way, those deals will be made because goods have to be moved, people have to be moved. It's really that simple. So this no deal thing is like a media generated phantom to scare the shit out of everybody. It's not really a formalized thing, and nobody can quite agree on what it is.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you.
I mean, as I was saying,
go on.
No, I was only going to say, as I was saying to CSG before we started, when it comes to whose laws and everything overthrow each other, Article 50 clearly states that if there's no deal reached, which, as we currently stand, no deal has been reached, their own laws say that we have to leave on no deal terms. So it's entirely in the EU's court now what they choose to do.
Yeah, but which is why I was saying that it's good to be able to offer a deal that benefits us greatly anyway. And then if they turn it down, you know, it's still on them, isn't it?
Yeah, this is what I mean. Is like we're leaving on the 31st, and that's that. So they can start the process of having negotiations and getting deals finalized now, and have something in place by the end of the month, or we leave like we were going to anyway, and they stamp their feet and, you know, grouch at us. We don't get a deal. Things will carry on in some semblance, but we will be outside, and then eventually the deals will come about when they have to, because, you know, several bucket loads of brie cheese need moved over to London and they can't do it, so they'll have to sign something. You know what I mean? Like it's either going to be the negotiations start before we leave or after we leave, but there will be negotiations because there have to be negotiations. And if the EU was obviously to outright refuse to ever speak to us again, then things like the WTO and the UN would get involved, because that's then infringing on the rights of the citizens of the EU to trade with the citizens of Britain. So, you know what I mean? Like this is a hysteria that's been generated by the opposition and the media. Like there's no like little box with deal in it. It just, you know, everybody agrees on what deal is, and, you know, it just slides into place like a jigsaw. It was never there. It's just it's a narrative device.
Yep, I completely and utterly agree with both of you. I'm gonna have to start getting myself off. So what I'm gonna do now is
good grief, common sense guy, you're getting yourself off on stream.
Well, God. You know, it's Brexit.
How dare you?
Well, but no, it's Brexit, and, you know, it always makes me happy.
Oh, there's carbon all over the keyboard.
Oh no, not the keyboard, the telly. I've got to get right up close. Anyway, what I'm going to do is the same thing as what I would normally do, which is have a final word from both of you guys. So if Kay, if you wouldn't mind going first, then Crumple Point, and then I'll do final word, and then I'll have to get myself off.
Just basically, we had a democratic election, and we had a democratic vote. The vote should be respected, whether or not you agree with it. It's that simple. In a world where there are dictators, it's best to be a shining example of democracy so that the rest of the world can look up to it, basically.
Don't forget to show your channel as well, mate.
Oh, yeah. Obviously, go check out Corellius Valentinius on YouTube. That's me, by the way. I make rambly videos. So if you can stand my deadpan voice for longer than 10 minutes, go watch my videos.
He does do good quality work, to be fair. It's normally well researched. Mr. Crumplepoint, go ahead.
I think that, the running theme of the evening is to, be wary of framing, because all these issues that we're talking about, it's how that they've been framed to the public and the politicians and the activists that are dictating all these presuppositions and prejudices that people have going into these arguments. And it's like we were saying about the no deal or like climate change, it's like, well, they get to and the things before that, it's like the people in charge and the people controlling the narrative have framed it in a certain way, and they're making us play the game. And that's why people like me like people like Boris Johnson, because they're not playing the fucking game. They've got a strategy, or they've got a play that they can make, and they play it. They fire their shot, and then there's the talking's done with. Like, you have to respond to the shot being fired. There's no talking about it. There's no committees, and he doesn't give a shit about their framing and their narrative devices that they use to control people. And I mean, they have to play the game to an extent, otherwise, that's why they're in politics. But yeah, I think, like, before you head into any of these discussions or researching these things, like, be really wary of how even the names of things are framing the discussion before you even have the discussion. And thank you to CSG for having me on, and it was good speaking to Kay again, and hope you guys have all had a good time thinking about this stuff and listening to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crumplepoint. I just really want to reiterate what both Kay and Crumplepoint have both said. We had a democratic procedure. We've done the voting. Though I will concede that if you do want to actually vote on whether or not we have a no deal and a deal, then I will concede that you can have that as a referendum. But that does not mean that me personally, in my opinion, if I was in charge, that I would allow to have Remain put onto that ballot paper or onto that referendum paper. The reason being is that we had the vote. We decided that we were going to leave what may as well. No deal is better than a bad deal. All that jazz with jazz hands in the background. And then people are still trying to say that they want to take it to the people to have the idea of no deal on a referendum, to have the idea of a deal on a referendum, and then to have Remain on a referendum. Now, if anybody knows anything about the idea of voting patterns, that means that you are automatically already split the Leave vote, regardless of how much you think it is. Even if it's by 20 to 30, you have still split it to almost half of what it would be, meaning that by majorative, Remain would win if it was at 40 or 45 or whatever percent at that point. So, yeah, the thing is that people always think that they don't know what they're actually espousing. They do. Because whenever you pull them up on that type of bullshit, generally they will try to defend it, as in it's democratic to do it that way, or we should do round voting and eliminate the other bit. I always find that very interesting, that they will use and circumvent democracy to the way that they want it, not the way that it is, not the way that the system has been put into place and what we accept it as. They would put their version of their democracy into place that benefits them, which somehow, some way, doesn't actually resemble democracy. More of an autocracy. But, technicalities. Then we go on to the idea of Boris Johnson's deal. I've heard a lot of people say that it doesn't look like it's a good deal. It doesn't look like it's this. It doesn't look like it's that. It doesn't do well for Ireland. It doesn't do well for this. To be fair, I've read it. We've read it together. It doesn't look that bad of a deal. It looks like it's going back to how we had situations drawn up before we were part of the EU as a political empire. I use that word on purpose. So it looks like we're falling back to the way that we were. And personally, I'm okay with that. That means legislation's already put into place. We've accepted that. We're happy with the way that it goes. It is a great foundation for us to be able to build off of. And I think that's something that we really need, that the foundation is there. And for anybody that actually reads the paper, you can see that Boris Johnson has conceded ground, considering that he is the person that says that we will leave what may. Now, again, Theresa May kind of rings in the back of my mind at that point, but, you know, we have to deal with what's in front of us. So for me, I think that the deal itself is half decent. It's something that we can build upon. But more importantly, as Crumple Point has pointed out, as we both did, that it is amazingly well done by Boris Johnson. He has conceded points on this, but remained firm to leaving what may. You don't get that very often in leaders nowadays. Most of them try to make secret deals under the table or transitions under the table, or as Theresa May's deal has been put into place as backstops, or, you know, EU standing very close to EU partnerships, as the saying was. And yeah, I think that this is an opportunity for us to realize that the EU will reject this, as we've already seen, which we would have got into. Does that mean that the deal's bad, or does that mean that the EU doesn't actually want a deal, or doesn't want to make it look that it's a good idea to leave the European Union? Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I do bid you farewell. I do bid you adieu, and I will speak to you again real soon. But bye for now. Take care.